Hello.
Hi.
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 Hello.
I'm curious about
Building open, authentic, loving relationship.
I'm curious about jealousy.
I'm curious about polyamory.
Does it just mean that you're fucking all the time?
How can I tell my parents that my partner is already married?
I'm curious about
How do you know when you're too busy to have another relationship?
I'm curious about dominant and subordinate relationships.
I'm curious about sexual health.
How can relationships evolve with people as they grow and change?
Hi, welcome to the Curious Fox podcast. This is a podcast for those who challenge the status quo in love, sex, and relationships. My name is Effy Blue.
And I'm Jacqueline Misla. And on the episode today, we're talking about threesomes.
Woo!
Yeah, so many people start their non-monogamous journey either with a threesome or play party or swinging. I think that's because couples probably feel more comfortable exploring this new relationship dynamic if they're doing it together. And so I thought that we should just dive into it. Let's talk about threesomes.
For sure. I think it's worth just mentioning, we're going to probably talk more about the dynamics of a couple and a third.
Yes.
But I think it's really worth mentioning that threesomes just means three people having sex together. It doesn't necessarily always have to be a couple who invites a third person. Right? It could be three independent folks get together and get down to it as well.
So all right, so let's start there. Let's do definitions. Okay, so threesome, right, three people having sex together.
Sure.
What are all the kind of the iterations and varieties that can take?
Yeah. Okay, so we can start with relationship structure, right? So you can have a couple and a third.
Yes.
And then that third can be an independent person, like a solo person, or that third can also be in some sort of a relationship and may or may not, be in a relationship in that moment.
Yes. Right. So is that the distinction between a threesome and a triad? A threesome, three people having sex. A triad, three people in relationship?
Sure. Okay. That's definitely a good distinction, right? So threesome is about sex, triads are about relationships.
Yes.
And then a threesome can be three people in a relationship together.
Yes.
It could be two people in a relationship who invite a third.
Right.
And that third person can be solo or in a relationship, but their partner or partners aren't involved.
Right.
Or it could be three solo independent folk getting together, getting down to it.
Yes.
And it's a different dynamic.
And I think that there's a misconception that somebody in the crew needs to at least be bisexual. Yeah. Generally the woman, probably.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily the case, right?
No.
You can have three straight people.
You can have three very straight people have sex together.
Yes. They just, I guess, so who has sex with who in that is what matters. Or you can have three queer folk and everyone's having sex with everyone, potentially.
Yeah. And you can also be queer and not necessarily be into the everybody, so that just because you're queer doesn't mean that you then have to have sex with all the people in the configuration.
So that's right. That's another misconception, is that then everyone is with each other, but it could be two people together, two people together, one person just watching, right? There could be all sorts of...
Totally. I think what we're going to explore is like, then how do you figure all this stuff out, right? And this is why it's we immediately demonstrated how actually confusing and complicated can three people having sex be.
Yes. And so this is on our mind for a few different reasons. One is we tend to meet lots of people who are interested in entering into open relationships. And so the conversation of threesomes naturally comes up as a part of that process because it's one way in which people enter into it. And our friend Taylor is interested in opening up her relationship and is also interested in starting that via threesome.
Yes.
Is that right, Taylor?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to have Taylor. And what's interesting about Taylor's story is Taylor has been a part of threesomes in the past as the third of a pre-existing couple coming into a pre-existing relationship and being the third there. And now this will be the first time that she is a part of the primary partnership and bringing someone into that relationship. So I'm going to be asking you lots of questions about that.
Yeah. I actually want to even just to complicate things even more and say... If you're a couple and you've experienced or want to experience a threesome situation, this now doesn't mean you're now automatically non-monogamous. Just because you're
yes.
having an experience doesn't immediately have to impact your entire relationship structure.
Yes.
That's also worth just putting it in there.
Yes.
It could just be some experience that you're seeking. You might want to do it once, twice, if you enjoy it, maybe every now and then. But now that doesn't necessarily mean you have to like restructure the entire relationship and like embrace non-monogamy. If that's not what you want to do, that's not what you want to do. And just because you've explored into this threesome world, it doesn't mean you're now an entirely different relationship. So that's also
Yes.
something that we'll talk about a little bit.
And I think that makes sense then why play parties and swinging and threesomes are an entry point for lots of folks, because none of those things actually then mean you are open. It just means that you and your partner are choosing to have this particular experience.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in that. And I'm also interested in then what does that mean for, again, the third person? If there's two people in a partnership and the third person comes in, I think that we often hear the side of the story of the couple bringing somebody in. And I'm very interested in exploring the other side of that. So,
Right. What if the person that's coming in?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. Exactly. Okay. So
And that's why Tyler's here.
right. And so I was going to say, I think that most of us, like in the lay world, right, who haven't necessarily experienced all these things, we get our information from movies. And in the movies or porn, right. Yes. In the movies and porn, it seems very easy. There is like, you're at a bar, you're at something, maybe you're in class or at the doctor's office, like it was a porn, and like there's like, some flirting and joking, and then there's like this moment of tension and chemistry, and then like cut to people being thrown up against walls and like, chemistry in the bedroom. And I imagine there's a lot of pieces in between that moment from flirting to being thrown up on the bed that we should probably explore.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask you, Taylor, what was your first experience in a threesome? Was it like the movies?
I'm going to say no. It was not like the movies.
What? It wasn't like the movies? What's wrong with you?
So basically, I was on Tinder and I was looking for a couple to be a third. And I guess there's not many unicorns on Tinder. So there was a lot of couples looking for a unicorn and there wasn't as many offering those services.
Yes.
So I decided to go on a date with a couple, and the date was almost like a job interview. You had to try and impress both people. You had to try, and then you also had to be impressed by both of them as well.
Did you know that going into it, or did you get a sense of that at dinner? You're like, oh, this is like a job interview.
Yeah.
I'm gonna run interference.
Yeah.
Just because we said, I wanted to be like, ding ding ding, vocabulary alert, vocabulary alert.
Right. What's a unicorn?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
I got that too. Yes.
Yeah. So let's take a open bracket and let's talk about what unicorns are, and close bracket and carry on, because I'm really interested in what Taylor is saying, but I want to make sure everyone's on the same page that are listening.
Yes.
So this idea of a unicorn, it has a bit of a darkness around it, even though it's like unicorns. It has a bit of a darkness around it. It comes from this idea that a couple who's seeking a very specific experience, and they're often seeking the unicorn is defined as this like single, often woman who's entirely unattached into both of the couples, emotionally available, willing to be vulnerable and go along with the ride, and not threatened or be threatened by the couple. And when her duty is done, she's gonna happily skip away and not want anything, not feel obliged, not feel affected in that kind of way. So the idea is that person is so rare that it's called a unicorn.
Yes,
right?
this like singular person who everyone's attracted to, who fits in beautifully in the dynamic of the relationship, doesn't get emotionally attached.
Right, exactly. And it's like, just happy to be there,
Right.
And I think, that's like the unicorn, and that's the dark side of like being very specific, and the sort of the idea is also that they're kind of dispensable a little bit, meaning like you don't have to take care of them. That's why they're kind of this special creature that then just like gallops away, enjoy. And not everybody who becomes a third, or not every threesome has a unicorn, right? It can just be three people who are coming along, and is not, and it's okay to be emotional attachment or friends doing it or things like that. So just to put it out there.
Yes.
But Taylor is very special. She's a unicorn.
Yes.
She,
So how does it feel to be called a unicorn?
yeah. You're like, "Ah."
I like really liked identifying with with the label. I thought it was cool too. I thought I was majestical.
Yeah, exactly. You are. Exactly. You're a rare
I was
creature.
like rare.
Yeah, that's true.
But I definitely fantasizing about what a unicorn is, like Effy was saying. I also felt like that was my fantasy too. Exactly what I wanted to be.
Exactly.
I kind of wanted to be dispensable. I wanted to just have a few sexual experiences with this couple, but it didn't wind up being like as easy as I thought it was going to be.
Let's go back to that first day because I interrupted. So let's get back to that.
Yes.
And carry on picking up from there.
So I want to take even a step back. You go onto Tinder and you say you're looking for couples. What happened? Talk to me about the decision that you made that you're like, you know what? I want to do this thing. I want to explore now being in a sexual relationship with two other people.
Yeah, I was in a closed relationship and I just kept having these ideas of being the third in a threesome experience. And so I had broken off my partnership and went to explore that. It was pretty easy just being on Tinder. The only thing that you have to do to specify yourself as a unicorn is put a unicorn emoji. And you could write looking for couples to play with, or looking to be a third, whatever you wanted. And I was pretty specific in what I wanted. I wanted some partnership who was in a closed relationship, and then I just wanted to sprinkle my majesticness in there. So yeah, that was my decision in wanting to do that. I think that I always have wanted to be in this situation. I have been bisexual since I was 15, or identified it then. So I just always, all the porn that I wanted, all the porn that I watched always like went down this theme of threesomes. So I thought, why not make my fantasies come true?
And what drew you to this particular couple? Because I'm sure that your Tinder box was flooded with interest. What made you say, I want to hang out with them?
I was really attracted to them. I really was. And it was interesting. They were both on the Tinder account talking to me. So when they were talking to me, they'd say, this is, and then use the woman's name or use the man's name. And I thought that was really cool that they were both on it. And it wasn't just the man or just the woman looking for it, because I thought it meant looking for the specific partner. I thought that meant that they must have like really open communication and trust each other, that they were on this same app on each other's phones and kind of both talking to me at the same time. So it felt like their foundation was really strong. And I think that that's why I was identifying like, oh, this means that this is going to be safe and this is what I wanted.
Good for you, by the way. Can we pause there? Like, good for you for looking for a healthy relationship, for looking for signs of communication, for looking for signs for stability, because this could be a really complicated thing. And I'm sure you're going to tell us that it was more complicated than you thought. But it sounds like you did the right things, the right steps to get yourself to be in a healthy space. Well done.
Yeah, there were a lot of people who were reaching out to me whose photos, it was only either the man of the couple or the woman of the couple. And I just kind of felt like that seemed sneaky to me. So I was like, oh, I would rather just have it up front be both of them speaking to me.
So you're out now on this date / job interview. And like, tell me the dynamics of that.
It was so funny. They were like texting me and I was on my way home from class and it was a Thursday and I was like, oh, like, why not just do this? This is like kind of cool. Like I felt like I shouldn't do it because it was a weekday.
Because that was the thing.
Yeah, and I was like a new student.
Threesomes are okay, but threesomes on a Tuesday?
So I went to the restaurant that they told me to meet them at, and then we were just around town. It was a small town, and we went to a bar, and they were sitting next to each other, and they were asking me a lot of questions about what I wanted and my boundaries and how I got here and what my sexual experiences have been and how I started looking to be a unicorn. So it felt like they were connected, like they had been holding hands and I was kind of on the side, and it was in a dark place and we were the only ones in this bar, and it was really kind of like romantic. And it turns out that their apartment was very close to the bar that we were at, and then we soon moved to their apartment.
Wow.
I guess I did well on the job.
You got the job in the first interview.
Yeah.
You're in.
Yeah, I was really nervous though. Like I remember clenching my fists. Like it's nerve-wracking to go on a date one-on-one, a first date one-on-one. Also, I had been in a relationship for a really long time, and so it was my first date with two people.
Yeah. And Effy, we were talking about this yesterday around the like rules of engagement with a threesome, that sometimes somebody just needs to initiate. Like there's again this mythical idea that like chemistry will just magically happen and then everyone just starts making out with each other or whatever the case is. But then someone actually has to be like,
Let's
would
do
you like a
this.
massage?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Would you like to? So what led from talking to not talking?
Specifically, she was showing me her perfumes, and I was like, "Oh, these perfumes are really nice." And then she pushed me on the bed and started making out with me.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And then he was in the kitchen and then came in and was like, "Oh, I didn't know this was happening." And we were like, "Yeah, come on in." And so it happened on the first date, which I don't know if that always happens, but I kind of wanted it to happen that way because I almost wanted to be dispensable after that. But that's not how it worked out, which we'll get into later.
Yeah. So how did you feel going home that night? You're like, I did it.
I felt kind of proud because it was my first threesome experience, and for 10 years I had been romanticizing this as like the most sexual experience that I probably will ever have.
Yeah.
Now I don't know now I'm pondering if I will have a more sexual experience than that one. And it also felt so far away from being like living in the person who I was. Like there's these judgments around who a unicorn could be. And I feel like I didn't match the criteria to what people think that a unicorn could be, and so it felt like I achieved something. Does that make sense?
What would you say that criteria? Like, what do you imagine people imagine a criteria for a unicorn is?
It's like a very sexually promiscuous woman who's like at a bar and on the prowl for a couple or another two women or two men. Yeah. And that's not how this had happened. But I think that those are my own biases and judgments, which I'm trying to work through.
Well, so that's interesting though. Were there things that you had to battle internally to say, I'm ready for this? Or because it was such a part of your fantasy, did you feel like you can compartmentalize it around who you are in the world and who you are in the sexual space?
I think that that's why it took so long. I think I couldn't compartmentalize it at first, because I think that I was thinking like, no, I had shame around it, like quote unquote, normal people don't do this, so why should I do this? And so as soon as I did it though, it was easy for me to say, well, this is my life by day and this is my life by night. Yeah, and I think that I've grown since then to know that your sexuality does not only define you.
Yeah, I think it's something that I definitely talk a lot about during the play party etiquette workshop that I teach, which is your sexual expression is a part of your self-expression. So it's an integrated part of you, and that it doesn't necessarily have to define you, but it is a part of you. And it's just needs, it's just like, how do you weave it into the rest of your identity, the rest of who you are? And that to view it as a type of self-expression, I would even go as far as to say like a creative self-expression.
Right. And I think the creativity actually piece is important because it leaves room for this exploration piece and curiosity. So that even if you do it, it doesn't mean that that's what you do. You may have done that and decided, nah, that wasn't for me, or that was really interesting, but I don't need to do it again. Like giving ourselves permission to just try and explore and not allowing particular behavior or experience to define who we are.
No, exactly. And I think like you pointed out, Jackie, the way that Taylor went about it, which is actually very healthy, considered, and to me, that is really more about following a curiosity than following anything else, actually. It's kind of like, it's my fantasy, I'm curious, I want to go and explore
There's
it.
so much ownership in that.
Right. And I wouldn't even, if Taylor, you were to do that and be like, it's not for me, I think the chances of you having a good relationship because you follow the curiosity, then even if you liked it and you want to do it over and over again, I think to think about it as a curious self-expression is probably like a healthier, more robust way of like putting your head around it.
Yeah. Did you feel like you wanted or needed like post-care afterwards somehow? Or what was the post-sexual encounter experience like for you?
There was a lot of cuddling, and it felt weird to leave because a lot of times who I was having sex with before, I would always stay after. So I had to leave that night because I had work on Friday. So the post-care was, it was it was what I needed, but it wasn't what I expected. I think that the idea of being that magical unicorn, I would have just like left afterwards and just like not been taken care of. But in the moment, I realized that I needed to be taken care of, and I was. It was nice. There was a lot of cuddling, and there was a lot of talking, and there was a lot of asking, did you like that? What didn't you like? And so it felt more
Debrief.
Yeah.
Job interview and a debrief.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I was hired now, and this is, and how can we make this job better for you?
Yeah.
And so it was nice, and it was comforting.
That's amazing, first of all, that like, because to dream about something for 10 years and then to do it and for it to live up to expectations,
That's true.
I feel like that's incredible.
Yeah.
I imagine that you speak with folks, Effy, that is not necessarily their experience.
Oh no, threesomes go wrong all the time.
Yeah, all right, let's talk about how does threesomes go wrong?
I will, but I just want to go back to one, because there's one thing that Taylor said. I'm just curious. This idea of, you want it to be dispensable, and I kind of introduced that word right at the top when I was talking about unicorns and what the expectations around unicorns are, which is this idea that you're done, then you sort of dismiss them. I'm wondering whether it was the do you really want it to be dispensable, or is it more like you want it to kind of be liberated, like you want to just gallop away, or is there a part of you that just like that and this comes with no judgment. I'm just curious whether this idea that particular way of like ending is appealing to you as well.
It is appealing to me as well, but when the sexual experience was pretty good, I wanted to do it again. Yeah, and that was surprising to me. Yeah.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying. Is being kind of dismissed or dispensable, did it feel like that was a part of the turn on of like, almost like I'm a slut and you can use me and it's fine? Or is it, I'm so empowered, I'm going to come in, I'm going to rock your world, and then I'm getting out of here?
I think it was that one. I'm empowered, I'm going to rock your world, and then I'm going to get out of here. Yeah. But then when I was in it, I was like, no, I think I'll stay for a little while. Which I think that you need to be really clear about what you want. And I think that those things can change in the middle of it. And I also think that you have to communicate that as well. I wanted this, and now this is happening, and so I think that this is what I want now. You know what I mean?
Nice. Yeah. Do you want to go back to talk about
threesomes
gone wrong?
Yeah. What was that? Because I'm interested in the evolution of that, because I think that that's probably part of how threesomes go wrong. But yes, Effy, threesomes go wrong.
Oh, well, actually, I think threesomes go wrong start with threesomes not happening. People like having the intention of doing them, and they're just not happening.
Everyone awkwardly sitting next to each other.
Yeah.
And like nothing ever happens.
Right. And that doesn't always necessarily mean, it's like, it could just be like three people. And I've heard stories of like experienced sex positive, even sex educators or like regular partygoers getting together for, someone's home with the intention of having a threesome or a moresome or whatever. And it's just not happening because no one initiated, or just like it just didn't happen. So like that's sometimes threesomes gone wrong is like threesome just did not happen.
All right, wait. I'm gonna pause vocabulary. So you said moresomes. There's threesomes, moresomes.
Yeah.
I imagine moresomes means more than three.
More than three. Yeah.
What's the difference between a moresome and a foursome and an orgy?
Yeah, those are like the $1 million questions. I use moresomes because I mostly because I teach the play party etiquette workshop. So it's like, I feel like threesomes, foursomes, and then after foursomes, it kind of becomes awkward. So it's like moresomes.
Yeah, like that.
And at some point it becomes an orgy. And that's just a lot of people having sex together.
Right. Okay.
And then that number, I think, if you look online, there's a lot of fun forums that are like speculating what that number is, anywhere from like 6 to 12. yourself, you know. You know, it depends what you want to what you want to engage in.
Well, and if you haven't experienced Play Party Etiquette, the workshop that Effy facilitates based on the book that she wrote, one of the biggest takeaways is do not be the one to break up an orgy. If you were not invited to the group of threesomes, foursomes, or moresomes, then you were not invited.
You're not invited. Don't jump in.
It is not just a pile of people.
Yes.
It is a specific invited group of people.
Yes. And if you want to know more about that, you can go to playpartyetiquette.com, and there's a whole bunch of information about how to navigate sex parties and threesomes and moresomes and mores.
Yeah.
So
the first you said going wrong by not happening at all.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I think a variety of going wrong, right? I think things like where mostly breakdown happens from communication, right? That's where things tend to go wrong. Either people don't really know what they want out of it, or they don't feel like they can say it, or they think they go into it thinking that's what they want, and they've talked about it, but then you're just like, oh, this is not what I want, and then they don't feel like they're not empowered to say, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, or I don't want to do this particular thing, or I don't want to do the whole thing anymore. And I think that can be harder when you feel like there's you against two people. So it can feel like you're in a threesome, everyone looks like they're having fun, and you're like, oh, I'm unsure. Then sometimes I think people feel like, oh, I'm gonna ruin it for everyone, right? It might feel like it's just the one of you against the two, you know. So I think that's where I've definitely seen and heard where things start to break down. And
I imagine jealousy goes in there too.
So that's the other side. So first it's just boundary stuff, and then secondly, especially with couples, if there's a couple and a third involved, jealousy, people get triggered, jealousy kicks in, people feel threatened or threatening, and goes both ways, right? And then the issues with the dynamics, you know, and again, you need to be able to communicate your way out of that, and to see if you have the skills. And if you're so triggered that you're not in your wise mind, you might not have your wits about you enough to communicate your way out of like a jealousy, you know, meltdown in the middle of a threesome. Like those happen.
Yeah, that is not what people are going for.
No.
And I imagine, right, because 3 different people have 3 different fantasies going into it. And you may feel like, wait, I'm not getting enough attention or time or energy. And then, and everyone is naked, and you're not, and emotions are high, and you feel vulnerable.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard stories of people you know, one of the couple just coming in, just getting out of the pile and just whacking the lights on. And it's over. You're just like, whoa, that's okay. Yeah. So it happens. It happens. Yeah. And I think, you know, I have no judgment for that person. In a way, I can be like, well, at least you stopped something that you don't want it to happen. I think though, if that's what you've done, you might want to do a whole bunch of work before you attempt it again. You definitely want a good breakdown and a debrief of what happened. Yeah. And handle a whole bunch of things next time you pull somebody into your the insecurity or whatever that's going on, for sure. Yeah.
So you went into this situation saying, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to have fun, and then I'm going to gallop away. And then after the first time, you're like, well, maybe one more time. Yeah. And then tell me more.
Well, then after one more time, I was like, well, maybe one more. And so we kept having sexual experiences, which were really positive. But I think that what they wanted was different than what I wanted. I wanted to be a unicorn, and they wanted a triad. And I was clear about that the first time. And I think that what had happened is that I kind of liked the sexual experience so much that I just ignored what they had been saying. They were like, yeah, but we kind of want somebody who's open emotionally and always going to be there for us to have sex with, and not having sex with anybody else. And so I was like, okay, I think that I can do that for you guys. I think that and like you were saying, it's hard to let down 2 people. To communicate your needs with 2 people when you know that they really want more from you and you don't know how to give that. and it's hard to say I don't know how to give that, and I'm having fun, so let me just try it. Maybe I could be what they want me to be. And so I tried it, and then what had happened was is that like I didn't communicate my needs enough, and they wanted more, and I kind of was like, I don't want to do that, I don't want to give that. And they weren't mad, but they wished that I had been in tune with all of that before I had continued the relationship for a few months.
And what was the distinction between being in a sexual relationship with them and being in an emotional relationship? Like, what did that look different?
Yeah, what were the expectations that what was the more they were asking that you were like, I'm not willing to give that?
They didn't want me to be with anybody else, even if that meant safely. Obviously, it's just safe, but even if that meant with a single partner, they didn't want that. And they also wanted to keep like constant communication every day. Like it was like a relationship where we would text good morning and text good night. Also sleepovers. They wanted me to sleep over like once a weekend, and it was hard to fit in 3 in one bed. What else?
Did you feel more attached to either of them, or did you start to like build kind of feelings for someone and not other? I'm curious about that dynamic.
Yeah, I did. I started to build more feelings for the man in the relationship, and that was hard too. So I actually felt like I didn't really want to break it off with him. And it would have been cool to have dated just him. But it wasn't, my feelings were not as equivalent to the woman. And I think that that's something that people don't think about when they go into a threesome, is that you're always going to be more attracted to one person than the other. I mean, I think that even if it's just a tiny bit more, there's going to be more attraction and feelings towards one. Would you agree, Effy?
Yeah, your story that you explained, I've heard your story over and over again. It's a common story. I don't think it's universal, but these dynamics you're describing, I think are common.
And did his wife ever experience that? And how did she feel about that? Like, did she sense that you guys had a deeper connection?
Well, they weren't husband and wife. They were just dating, and I don't think that she noticed when we were all having sex, but by her permission, we had sex together, me and him. We didn't have penetrative sex. We had everything but. And then she came home and was really mad, but she had known. So it was really odd when she came home and saw that like we had actually done stuff without her. Her emotions got the best of her, and she was really mad. So
how did you feel?
I felt like I should have left, but she was just like, no, it's okay, stay, it's totally fine. And I was like, I really feel like I need to go. And she wanted me to stay, and then she wanted to have, like, all of us have sex. Also, what's interesting about threesomes is that you have to consider two people's libidos. And I think that in my fantasy, my libido was like, could match two people's libidos, and it just couldn't. Like after I had 1 hour of sex, I mean, even 1 hour was a lot for me. I didn't know how I could have like another hour, but their libidos were really a lot higher than mine. So.
Were there times where you were engaged where they were together, but you didn't have to be like in the sexual interact? That you could just be there, either playing by yourself or just watching or just resting from the day's activities?
Yeah, that happened a few times. Okay. But it was, if I was there, they'd be like,
they'd want you to come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a typical unicorn story, right? It doesn't necessarily. I think this is like, when I say typical, it's like the dynamics are very familiar into the unicorn definition. To me, that doesn't necessarily mean all threesomes. I think this is more a unicorn story, not a universal. Not that there's a universal, but a threesome story. I think this is very often couples looking for this unicorn, this magical creature who's available in every way, sex drive, emotional time, and just for them, in an almost, so I do know a couple clients, they do call their third a pet, and this is it agreed upon, she likes being the pet, but it is that kind of, that's their attitude, and she likes it, and there's no judgment, but it has that kind of dynamic of this is the third, this is our pet.
There's a clear hierarchy.
Right, and I think it that does exist in the world. I think it does require three very aware, very willing people who are into it and really, really want it. I think like in your situation, Taylor, the fact that you weren't into it and you just like agreed to it, I don't think that's sustainable, you know?
If you're giving advice either to possible unicorns out there or to couples who are looking to bring in a third, what do you wish you would have known then? What do you know now that you wish you would have known then?
I wish that I would have known that it is to be like really, really direct and keep communicating your desires and boundaries and to keep revisiting the relationship instead of just being very passive about it. I wish I would have known that being very clear and with your words and your wants would get you a lot further than ending it.
Yeah. How was the ending?
It was okay. It wasn't like a fight or anything. I literally could not muster up to disappoint both of them. So I did kind of ghost, which is a common millennial thing, which I'm not proud of. I actually think about that a lot because I didn't want to ghost them, but I didn't have the confidence or the words to say like, you're asking for more than what I'm willing to give.
So as you think about opening up your relationship now and potentially having a threesome and bringing a third into an established partnership, has your experience as being the third impacted how you would treat someone entering into your relationship?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely have some like ways that I want to treat that third person. And that obviously involves being more clear and more communicative than I was in the first one. So I don't want to have a third person in our committed relationship. I would want to have this person come in and be a part of our sexual experiences, maybe once or twice, and then we would remain friends, but not always be having a sexual experience with them. I would also make sure that they knew clearly what they wanted and have them tell me that they are okay with communicating it. Like I said that I was okay communicating it and I would communicate that to the couple that I was with, but I winded up not. So I would want to kind of have more time to get to know that person and know their wants and desires and feelings and how they'll communicate it before we rushed into a sexual experience. So getting to know them a little bit more so that I can identify if they're feeling uncomfortable. I think that's something that I would do, is take more time before inviting them.
That makes sense. I think there's something to be told about that, about like the practicing one's boundaries. I go to a practitioner to do some like body energy work. And when they first start kind of touching and pushing into areas of my body, they say, I'm going to push in and I need you to tell me to stop and to move my hand. And so like that's a part of the practice where I say, can you please stop? Can you please move your hand? Just so that I actually in that space get the practice of saying it, so that this way when there's a moment where I really do feel like there's a boundary, I can say, hey, can you please stop and move your hand? And so I think that's an interesting concept that I wonder can be introduced to this, of even when someone is comfortable, let's just practice you saying, I'm not comfortable right now, just so that we can like get used to what that feels like and sounds like in our voice.
For sure, both saying and hearing.
Yes.
And both saying no, hearing no, and in saying no, seeing that the other person isn't crumbling into a mess.
Yes.
Right? Because often, especially women, we are socialized not to say no, to take care of the other person, blah, blah, blah. Right. So often people don't say no because they don't want to disappoint the other person, or they think that the sort of the no is going to become this like sledgehammer and it's going to like slam them across the wall and they're going to be destroyed, you know? And I think there's value in saying no all the time. And I would even say often if you're in a long-term, even not long-term, if you're in a monogamous relationship and you're having sex, practice consent.
Yes.
You know, like ask, keep asking. Is this still good? Check in. What do you want to do? Actually, tonight, I don't feel like that. Like just because you felt like doing something, you know, last weekend after, 3 glasses of wine, you might not be up for doing that, Wednesday night after a long hard day's work, you know? So I think just practicing consent in your monogamous relationship, in your everyday sex life, and saying your yeses and nos and using those muscles and also hearing the yeses and the nos and going, okay, no's don't kill me.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
I survive. Everything is
Yes.
all right. Doesn't mean I'm not loved. It just means the person doesn't want to do this thing anymore. And I think just if you want to start, you know, if you want to have a threesome, practice those things in your, you know, twosomes.
Yeah. I think that there's also a misconception that there is more emotional labor involved in saying no. And so what I mean by that is I'm there are times as a parent, as a partner, where like it's easier. I'm like, all right, fine. Yes, let's just do the thing. Because like the idea of dealing with you being upset about it and me having to like make you feel better feel like emotionally exhausting, and it feels easier and faster to just do the thing that's been asked. And I think that actually does carry then resentment and carries frustration. Like there's an emotional burden there that is dismissed when you're thinking about the emotional toll it will pay to deal with someone else's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, it's just easier if I just do it. But then you're carrying your own anger and frustration and resentment.
I think there is inherent emotional labor in decision making, period.
Yes.
Whether it is tolerating the outcome or
Yes.
tolerating the internal experience.
Exactly.
So I think to say that one's going to be easier than the other is just to realize that any decision making, especially if it involves your well-being, yourself, and then it requires you to check in, comes with emotional labor, period.
Yes.
So it's like you said, do you want to do it upfront or do you want to do it internal?
Right.
And I think since you're going to do the work, you might as well do the work that's in line with your authentic state.
Exactly right.
Then, you know, doing the internal work, it's just going to work out. And it's not going to work out in the long term, you know?
Yes, because you're going to feel more disappointed that you continue to not stick to your own boundaries.
Yeah. And you will eventually end up avoiding the situations because you haven't got the practice of saying your yeses and nos in line with your truth. You know, you'll end up inevitably, because that's just how the brain works, that you will try to avoid putting yourself in those situations, which means you're going to miss out on experiences, which means you're not going to, you know, follow your curiosities and live your authentic life. So the sooner you become, you know, strong in your decision making and sitting with those, you know, moments of discomfort, the sooner you're liberated.
Yes. I think that's that's in and of itself is amazing. The more you become comfortable with discomfort, the better everything in life will be. Actually,
sure. Yeah, exactly.
Like so much. I mean, my work, you know, we're supporting people's careers, so it's very different. But so many of my conversations is just about the fact that people are avoiding having a difficult conversation with their boss or with their colleague or with their thing. And it's just me helping them build up the courage to do the difficult thing. And there's so much energy being spent to like avoid being uncomfortable. But if you can get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Liberating, my friend.
It is
liberating.
yeah.
And I think just tying this back to threesomes, it's just like there are more decision-making points in a threesome.
Yes.
Because there are more people and there are more experiences, you know, and you need to be able to be okay navigating.
Yes. So tell me more. So you're thinking about how you would want to make sure that you find ways to continue to communicate with the other person and make sure that they feel comfortable and good. What are the things that you would do now as a result of your experience?
When inviting somebody in, I would take a lot more time, like time with just getting to know them before that we had the sexual experience. And that might seem to them like it's dating, but I don't think that it would be. I'd be clear with like, this is not dating. I just don't want to have sex the first time around because I want to be more, I want to know where you are at in your stage of being like exploring the world of threesomes. And I want to know if you have those skills that I didn't have when going into the threesome.
Yeah.
So,
and it also sounds like based on your experience, you'd want to make sure that you and your partner are in a really good place.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes people might use, let's spice up a bad relationship with a third, and that's just disastrous, I imagine. Yeah. And so instead, it sounds like you're going to make sure that you and your partner are like in a really good, strong, healthy place before entering into this.
Yeah, and we are. I just think that the time that it takes to sustain a third in your relationship, the way that you, your partner, and that third all agree on, it takes a lot of time and effort. It's another whole relationship. Or or if you want it to be dispensable, I still think like dispensable, just a one-time thing. I still think it takes time finding it and finding that person, and it takes a lot of energy to find that person. So at this moment, I'm not doing it because of time. So yeah, I think that there's a time and a place for everything, and like a time in my relationship when I will go forth with that. And it won't be because our sex life is lacking. It'll be because it's thriving.
Absolutely. Good for you. Yeah, and I think that is really important. And I think I want to talk a little bit about those dynamics, right? That what you've just said, Taylor, I think is super important. That you're not doing it because something is lacking, but is thriving, and it's like the next thing that you want to experience. And I think similarly, the dynamics that you're creating with that third person, and we're talking now about, we're focusing on couples and a third person, right? Sometimes the struggle is because the couple is looking for a third person to do things. Right, so they're like, we're looking for someone to do these things. We have these fantasies, and this person is going to fulfill our fantasies, rather than saying, here's a possible experience, and here is like all the things that can happen, and going into it with curiosity and thinking about what is it that we can create together, rather than here's our list of things that we want to do, and for these we need a third person. So let's go out there and find a willing third person and get them to agree to do these things. Is a very different attitude in your search than let's find this like fun, up for it third person who's adventurous and curious and sexually open, and see what we can create, see what we can make happen. The three of us get together, and that really equalizes the playing field, right? Then there isn't this dynamic of the unicorn or the pet when you're like searching for this one person that's going to fulfill your desires, rather than searching for a partner. Not in a partner in a like a romantic partner, but like a partner in this experience, and see what we can create, rather than having this checklist of things that you want fulfilled. Yeah,
it's like shifting your expectations about the entire relationship that you think that you want, but from experience, my personal experience is that you think that you want something, and then it happens, and then maybe it shifts. So yeah, like having open expectations before you even get there would solve those issues.
Having no expectations, maybe. Right. Yeah. Maybe not a partner, a collaborator, right? That's what I want to say. A collaborator in the experience of threesomes, and kind of saying like, what do you want it to happen? Like, what can we make happen? What happens if we do this, and what we do that? An open mind, open heart, curious. And really connecting with the other person as an individual, not an entity that's going to fulfill your list of desires.
Yes. Okay. So then, with that being said, seeing everybody involved as an individual and as a human being, pre, during, and post tips. Anything that we can add to that we haven't already? So pre, it sounds like, be in a healthy relationship if you're introducing someone into your relationship, and if you're the third person, or if you're three separate people, just be in a good space yourself. Be clear about what you want and feel comfortable talking about it and naming that. So that's all like pre stuff, getting to know each other, listing out what you want to create together as collaborators. During, I imagine, lots of also communication.
I think it's communication. I can't say that enough.
Yes.
Knowing your boundaries for sure.
Yeah, and also like knowing what you won't do and stating that pre the going into the bedroom. So knowing that maybe anal play is not on the list of things to do. So
yeah, and I think we say communication. Like, what are the things that you want to communicate is important. Right. Boundaries for sure. Definitely a conversation around sexual health.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing.
Everybody has different tolerances to these things, and risk tolerances. Like, what is everyone's risk tolerance? What barriers are going to be used? What are the conversations that needs to be had? Some people want a full on, sexual history, STI, results, and then be very clear about what are your needs in terms of feeling safe and secure, so that you can have fun. Right? So I think that conversation is definitely.
Did you guys talk about that? I imagine you did.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we talked about their sexual health like their sexual health agenda, and then mine as well. So they were in a committed relationship, and they were not using sex with barriers with each other. But it was important to me that everyone was using barriers with me, and so they respected that, obviously, and they wanted the same thing. So so it was like a lot of mechanics too. It was like, okay, now we have to. Okay, well, if you're shifting from her to me, we have to put on something now, and so there's like, so it's actually it's a lot sloppier, and it's not as fun as the movies. Like, it's not as straight cut and clear. It's sloppier.
For sure. Yeah. And having all the things with you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like supplies, if you're dealing, like different types of condoms and gloves and, dental dams, maybe lube, wipes, like all the things. I think there's some preparation needed, unless you have a stash of it at home, I think you should.
That might be fun too as collaborators to buy your little kits of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
To prepare. Yeah.
So like health, sexual health stuff, and then desires, the fun stuff. Like, what are the things that you can imagine, or you can sort of think together, you can create together, you can fantasize, or you have been fantasizing about. Yeah. I think definitely an understanding of everyone's orientation. Yeah. And how that presents.
Yes. And where their curiosity is.
Because
we've had that conversation as well, that one's orientation and one's curiosity could be in different spaces. Absolutely. So you may identify as straight, but would be willing to see what happened if this, or would be willing to watch this, or feel this, or experience that. And again, let's make sure that we don't feel like our experiences don't necessarily define who we are. So even if you play with someone of, the same gender, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to identify now as queer. And so space for identification, but also curiosity.
I would also say, and this is hard, but I would say if you're going to do this work and you really want to have a good time, I would find a way to leave egos out of it. Because I think a threesome is a place for potential comparison, potential just like being next to somebody, or like, do they know more than I do? Do I know? I think at least for me, it's like, leave your ego out of it. Consider it as a experience of exploration of curiosity, potential learning, and really try really hard and do the mental work beforehand, not to compare. Yeah. Because that it definitely opens you up to be in that space.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question then. Because I think that some people I've spoken to have said, I would want to do a threesome, but it has to be some random person that I've never met before and would never see again. And then others are saying, I'd want it to be a good friend. Like, I want it to be someone that I know. And so I'm thinking about that as it relates to the comparison piece, because maybe it is harder if that person is in your life and your partner orgasmed in a different or bigger way with like your best friend that you didn't realize was going to happen. So just thoughts around that. Like, what do you guys think about choosing someone you don't know versus experiencing that with a friend?
I just wouldn't personally experience it with a friend, because I'm afraid that it would be awkward after. And most likely it could be awkward because of the situations that happen while in the bedroom. So maybe my partner does have a better orgasm with that person and I'm like resentful. And so I can't be not awkward around that person while we're not having sex. I also think that I would want it to be somebody random, because I think that the foundation you can build upon so much. Like, you have the choice and the option to kind of craft this own relationship, as opposed to having a foundational relationship as a friend and maybe having a harder time getting back to that after you've all had sex together.
Devil's advocate, Effy?
I fuck my friends. I mean, I say this all the time. So I like to be, most of my relationships baseline of friendship. So even my partners, people I have sex with tend to be like a baselining of friendship. And then they become sexual play partners or sexual partners or romantic partners. So I prefer to have, especially like more complicated experiences like threesomes, orgies, kink, that kind of stuff, I prefer friends. And I think the closer that I am with friends, the better their experience is for me. I will say that as a caveat, though, not every friend. I just happen to have most of my friends in the sex positive community. And that's kind of how most of our friendships started in the first place, like in play spaces and within the community that really embraces this open sexuality as a part of a connection. So I do have a bunch of friends that I wouldn't have sex with, and they're my good friends. That's just not where they come from. And I think that's more aligned with what Taylor is saying, which is like, it would make things complicated, like with those people.
Yeah. In your experience with either with yourself or with clients, complications with involving a friend, like tips that we can give to folks if there are friends that want to try this thing, maybe some things that they need to talk through that's different because they're in a friendship.
Meaning if you wanted to have a threesome with your friends?
Right. So
what
maybe
are the
there's partnership, or maybe there's 3 individual friends, or there's a couple and they want to, one of the couple's friends, they want to introduce into the third part of the threesome.
Yeah, I think not that dissimilar to some of the things that we talked about, but and also I would say probably a backup plan is what happens if things are awkward. Like embracing that this might actually go wrong, and what do we do? Like, how do we restore? Like, is there a way that we almost like back up the relationship before, have the experience,
mind a race.
Exactly, and like almost like mentally isolate the experience, and if it goes great, carry on. If it doesn't, you kind of rewind back to the backup and kind of like put that as something that you've tried. Maybe it's like it's not that similar to like good friends who go and travel together and they realize they're not traveling partners and they have shit time traveling and they come back and they need to kind of decompress for a little bit and they go back to being friends, realizing that they probably should never travel again. I think I would put that in a similar experience, that you can try it with your best friend because you do everything else together. Why wouldn't you do this together? And you do it, and it's actually not very good, and then you just sort of give yourself a bit of time and like honor the relationship that was before, put it down as an experience that you tried that didn't work out, and carry on and know that that's what might happen.
Even state that beforehand, have a conversation about if that happens, we need to just take time and then like restore the friendship after that, after a few days or moments away from like each other. So that makes sense to me.
My closest experience with that was when I was in high school. At some point my best friend of high school and I, like, one sleepover or another, we're like, well, let's see what happens if we messed around a little bit. And then I was like, all right, did that thing. Like, that was cool and interesting. And then I, like, in the following sleepovers, like, she'd be like, let's watch this movie that like has this long sex scene, or let's like do, and I was like, oh, you're trying to make it happen again. And in my mind, it's like Taylor saying, like, I was like, we did the thing, great, like that was cool, I'm done now. And I realized, and so we never had, we were, I don't know how old we were, 17 or something, so we didn't have any of those conversations or anything, but I realized afterwards, like, oh, we had different expectations, or we experienced something different, and what does that mean, and how does that mean for our friendship? And it didn't end up, eventually it just faded away as a thing that we did, and we ended up, we're still friends. But in retrospect, I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that was really, we set ourselves up there for something dangerous.
Yeah. And I think it's even more, I think it's when you're younger, it kind of gets erased and then gets sort of like, diluted with a bunch of other experiences. Right. I think it can stick around a little bit more in your adults. So I think you do need to acknowledge that it might go wrong. It might not work out. It might feel a little bit awkward. Let's give ourselves a pure, decompression time, and like make sure we reconnect. Make sure we don't like avoid each other for like the rest of history.
Yes.
And just be really honest about the experience.
Yeah.
I feel like naming that would also help with shame, after. Like, if you name it before and that happens, and then there's just like okay, well, we'll see in a few months, and it was never talked about, that person could feel like, oh no, I wasn't good enough. I wasn't, like, I didn't know exactly what I wanted. So then it helps with not feeling guilty or shameful or bad about yourself and hurt your ego.
For sure.
Have you thought about, if you are looking for a third via like dating apps, what your profile will say?
Well,
the unicorn emoji. Seeking unicorn.
Yeah, actually, we have had this conversation. It would just be me. I'm not going to put a of photos of me and my partner on
That's so
there.
interesting
Because you were looking
I
for
know.
difference,
I know.
right, for you.
I know, right? Yeah, you're right. Oh God, I'm having an epiphany. I'm just nervous about like publicly putting out my relationship out there. Yeah. I'm not ready there. I'm not there yet, and I think that I can get there for sure to not have guilt and shame about this identity. You know? So
that does have to be challenging, because I remember when I was on OkCupid a year or two ago, getting lots of messages from people in search of a unicorn, which was not what the experience I was going for, and there was lots of pictures of couples, like headless couples, right? So just the two people's, bodies standing next to each other. And I understood that, because they're trying to, what if a colleague is on there or something like that? And it's hard to then be like, yes, I want to spend time with this headless pair.
I think that works if people are just seeking experiences and not connections, right? Because a headless body picture is essentially saying, here are the bodies that you're gonna experience. Like it's more, I think, activity seeking than connection and experience, like a connection and kind of like more of an experiential, seeking, if that makes a distinction.
Are there places where, if you don't want to do that online and there's more intimate spaces, I mean, certainly Curious Fox events, people can come in any form of partnership or not, or whatever folks are looking for can come and talk about that. But are there other spaces, other resources? Maybe in the show notes, we'll include some resources around where people can get more information, but also go to, depending on where they are.
the couple that I was seeing met on FetLife. Do you guys know what FetLife is?
So we can definitely talk about FetLife is it's like Facebook for Kinksters, fetlife.com, like fet as in fetish, fetlife.com. It's an interesting site. It's ugly, meaning it's just like a horrible user experience, but it is the Facebook for Kinksters. So if you're looking for any experiences outside the status quo or any sort of the norm, FetLife is a place that you can go to start that search, that exploration. Just be mindful that it's a shitty user experience. I mean, I found my way into the community through FetLife, but similar to you, Taylor, I was very intentional about what I was seeking. At least my thinking at the time was, I wanted to find a mentor, and I wanted that mentor to be some sort of a community leader or a leadership role. Because in my logic was that they would have too much to lose to do anything bad to me, was my logic. I wouldn't, knowing what I know now doesn't really, it's not as foolproof as I thought at the time, right, before all this.
There's so many folks who have been in this sex positive leadership community now who are like, oh no.
Yeah, exactly. But at the time,
they're on the redemption road now at this point, right?
Exactly. So you just have to figure out something that makes sense to you. And at the time, I was like, some lone guy, behind his computer seemed so much riskier to me than somebody who was clearly a part of the community in a leadership position and would have a lot to answer for if I was to be like, that person did these things to me without my consent, as like, we now know that's not the foolproof, logic that I thought it was, but just some sort of logic. Like for you were like, I want it to be a couple, and I like that they had their shit together, and so whatever it is that you're looking for, just have some being thoughtful about it, I think is important, whether you're looking on FetLife or looking on Meetup, right? And you can look at meetup.com, find meetups for people who are either within the community or sex positive community or non-monogamous community in your local area, and go to like vanilla meetups, so meaning like non-sexual meetups, be it movie nights, game nights, seminars, talks. I mean, Curious Fox does a bunch of programming in New York City. Wherever you're listening, like search your local Curious Fox equivalent, and go and meet the community first before like looking for dates, is what I would say.
Any other threesome advice?
I have a few more actually. I'm on a roll. We touched on it a little bit. I just want to put it out there. So this is let's talk about it from a couple's point of view, because we are kind of focusing on that. We talked about comparing yourself and egos and how that can be triggering and jealousy and all that kind of stuff. We are all human. That stuff may happen. what can we do about it, right? I think definitely try to check egos out of the door is one way of doing it. And for me, like, how do you do that? For me, my path is to sort of go towards curiosity. So if I notice that my partner is having a better time with this third person, I actively choose to take the curious path rather than the comparison path. Oh, really? What's happening here? What's occurring here? What's bringing more pleasure? What can I learn from the situation? So I actively choose that curious path and the compersion path. Oh, wow, they're having an amazing time. They're learning something about themselves and they're experiencing something that I can learn from this situation. So that's the path that I take. That's the path I recommend.
And then you could do it better.
Exactly. And then I go learn all about it. And next round,
I'm just picture right threesome with Effy, and then like I look over and she's like a notepad,
notepad and Google, and a stack of books. But I mean, kinda, you know. But that's the way I would recommend it. If you find yourself you're in any kind of comparison. If you're saying like, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, see if you can shift that thinking into what can I learn from this? And, you know, how can I do this? You know, similar, better, or like, what would it feel like to be done on me? Like there are a bunch of paths into curiosity that can take, like what are the other experiences that can come from whatever is happening, you know? I have definitely learned some of my best tricks from other people engaging in like, you know, at parties or with other people. And like, where else are you going to learn? Porn is not a good place of education, right? And the things that are happening in porn, you know, these people are pros. This is literally what they do for a living. Should you do all the things? Maybe not, you know? But when you're doing it with people who are just enjoying sex, there's a lot to learn from that, you know? And then when there's somebody else, when it's like 3 people, I don't know. I actually like threesomes because it's like a cool learning experience for me. But I'm a nerd, so that's just like, that's just how I roll. But I'm just encouraging people to, you know, especially if you feel like your ego's in it, to mentally get it out of the way. See it as an experience, see it as a learning opportunity, see it as a, you know, like, I don't know, like evolution in your sexual expression, whatever story that you can like wrap your head around that sort of keeps your ego out of it. I think that's like the best advice that I can give people.
I agree. That's good advice.
And it takes the shame out of it. What it makes me think of is like, oh, I want to be on all sides of it. I want to have someone come into my partnered relationship, and I want to go into someone else's partner relationship, and I want to have 3 people who none of us are in partnership, like just to see what all those things would be like.
Yeah, no, exactly. And explore, it's fun, you know, explore. Be safe, always be safe, like learn about safer sex practices. It's different for more than 2 people, you know, you have to keep track of your hands. You need to use a bunch of barriers. If you're playing with more than...
And use barriers on toys.
Barriers on toys, barriers on hands, you know. Learn about, if there are multiple vaginas involved, learn about internal condoms, right? Because internal condoms go inside a woman, not on the penis. So you don't have to constantly change them. So if you have 2 vaginas and a penis involved, let's reduce everything down to genitals. And it's actually, you might actually have a better time and a more fluid time if the people with vaginas have internal condoms, 1 each, and then the penis, you don't have to worry about changing condoms all the time. An example. So
I have a question though. If a man isn't wearing a condom and you're using the internal condoms, can they get an STI that's transmitted inside the internal condom and then another penis goes inside the internal condom?
We're talking about 2 vaginas and 1 penis.
Right. So you're saying,
yes. Okay, yeah,
but that's
I'm
a good
sorry. I was
question.
thinking
Now,
about
let's
a
say
sex
if you're
party.
so you're in a sex party and there's multiple penises and internal condoms. Do you continue to switch the internal condoms?
No, you need condoms. And then you can't use an external. You can't use a latex like a penis condom and an internal condom.
So multiple penises. Then there needs to be condoms on the penises.
Yes, and you have to change them from vagina to vagina.
Right, 1 penis, multiple vaginas. One can use internal condoms.
Okay,
is it good? Like people, because we don't. Not many people know about internal condoms, and if you're in a multiple situation, because not everybody has it in multiple situations.
Yes.
So this is what I mean.
And finger condoms.
Yeah, condoms on fingers.
Yes,
gloves. I'm a big fan of gloves. Like, use gloves, everyone. It's much smoother entry, more smoother.
No, gloves freak me out.
Really?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes, my partner has black gloves. I mean, not to use during sex, but to use like for cleaning. And every once in a while, she'll like put it on in a way that's like trying to be seductive, and it just makes me feel like she's a serial killer. And it completely freaks me out.
That's funny.
Yes.
I like gloves.
Yeah.
I like that now. You can like the black ones used to be like the trend. Like everyone's like, oh, black ones. Now I see a bunch of like pink ones around. I think they're cute. Like really like pink, especially if guys wearing these like pink gloves. And I'm like, that's so cute.
Maybe pink ones. Maybe that would be the black ones though. I can't. No.
Like get small ones that really fit. So get the size that often doesn't. So since we're going
right, not like dishwasher.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can use them if that's what you're into. Go for it.
Yes.
But if you really want to get the sensation of it, I really like ones that really fit you well, like almost like a condom. Like it really fits your hand well. So you can get smaller, extra small ones if you got small hands, or big ones if you've got big hands. I find it much smoother entry and exit. And I don't have to worry about my nails. I don't have to worry about cutting people. So I just happen to like gloves. But if they freak you out, don't do it.
Yeah, maybe the pink ones.
Pink ones are cute. Yeah. Like ego, sexual health. There's more to it when there's more people involved than you're just the two people. Learn about that stuff. Know your boundaries.
Communicate them.
Know your words. Indulge your desires, revel in your desires. Even if you're not going to do all the things, feel empowered to talk about it. Like lay about in bed and talk about the stuff. Make that a part of your experience. Like, make an evening out of it. Spend the first hour talking about all the things, the desires and the dreams, the things or fantasies that you can dream up, and then spend 2 hours or 1 hour like trying to fulfill some of them, not all of them, but make it a part of the whole experience.
Yes. You can stretch out the happiness and the experience by the fantasizing beforehand, the doing it, and then afterwards remembering your favorite moments and talking about it.
Yeah. And humor. That's the other thing. Humor. Laugh about it when it goes a bit awkward. Like
you're saying, right? It's not as smooth as sometimes it's messy and awkward.
Did you find moments of humor, or was it just awkward?
No, I found moments of humor. Yeah.
That's the other thing that I would say. Like, it's not going to go all right. It's not going to go like, these like blurred out scenes from movies or like hardcore, orchestrated porn, segments. It's going to be messy, and it's going to be awkward, and find humor, laugh.
But that's just life, right? Messy and awkward, but funny.
Laugh. Yeah, make sure you laugh.
Yeah. Taylor, any last thoughts?
No, I think you guys covered it. Yeah.
So now I want to hear back from people out in the world. I want to hear your threesome stories. Actually, so a few things. One, if you're into this podcast and you've been listening, please like us and review and share the podcast. It really does make a difference.
Huge.
Our work,
especially on Apple Podcasts.
Yes.
So we're shameless plug. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please take like 2 minutes, rate us and leave us a review.
Yes.
We read them all.
Because our work is, we say hashtag change the noise. What we want to do is continue to create experiences where you can hear things and watch things and see things and read things so that you can change the noise around you, so that you give yourself more permission and inspiration to live a life that is aligned with your curiosity and your authenticity and your truth. And so we want to make sure that what we're creating is in alignment with that. So like us, share us, review it. You can find us on all of our things on We Are Curious Foxes. So hashtag or at We Are Curious Foxes on Facebook, on Instagram, on Patreon. And as always, you can reach out to us and share your ideas. You can tell us which episodes have helped you in your journey, or just let us know that you are listening by emailing us at listening@wearecuriousfoxes.com.
Awesome. We've covered yet another awesome topic.
And this threesome of people talking about
threesome of people talking about threesomes. And stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Bye.
Curious Fox Podcast is not and will never be the final word on any topic. We solely aim to encourage curiosity and provide a space for exploration through connection and story. We encourage you to listen with an open and curious mind, and we'll look forward to your feedback. Stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.